colleagues, welcome back after the first coffee break of the day. As we said before, we want to look at the topic of equivalence from a number of perspectives. The perspective that we're now going to hear is the European perspective, or part of the European perspective, because of course Europe is much bigger. We have a very experienced expert, Volker Gehmlich, who has done a lot of work in the Bologna context and is a very, I think, experienced presenter. And he will now talk about the European experience in equivalence, challenges and achievements, or achievements and challenges. We will see. Volker, the floor is all yours, and we will time the slot in such a way that we have something like 15 to 20 minutes for questions and answers after the presentation. Okay?
Thank you, Arthur. I was just amazed when I thought you said 15 minutes for talking and presenting, because I presented 500 slides just for 15 minutes is a bit too much, isn't it? Well, thank you very much for having invited me to this meeting, and I like to see many acquainted faces I've met before in some other trainings. And here with Tim, I hope that we represent part of our views on the experience we have gained in the past years. And I think one of the most important things is that we have not stopped learning. I was just talking to Tim, when did we first talk about it? Was it in 1999 or was it in 1997? In fact, we started in 1989 with the discussion of recognition, equivalence, etc., after already having been in the process of joint study programs which began in 1979, or 77 in concrete terms, and my project started in 79. So imagine, and we just sometimes wonder, haven't we said that before? Have we developed since? And this is sometimes difficult, but we have. We have, in particular, in the sense of widening the scope and widening the understanding, and having now you here as participating as well and sharing our views. Well, as the previous speaker said, what are we looking for when we're talking about equivalence? And I also ask myself, is it identity? Is it this what we are looking for? Or perhaps is it this? By the way, lunch is at 12:45. Huh? Nevertheless, equivalence is one thing. Is it harmonization? Is it harmonization? That means, do we have a standard? The standard was mentioned before. Well, this identifies something. We talk about music, being in line, being in tune. You have heard tuning this morning. They are in tune. Can we be that? Or is it that we are looking for same value? Or different and the same value? Can that be? Diversity? Is that what we are looking for? Does that enrich? And I think this is exactly it. The previous speaker didn't like the word difference. Yes. Let's say diversity. There are differences in the outside, whatever, in some ideas, but this enriches. And what we have to agree on is how we understand each other, although we are different from the outside. Look at these teams. Look at them. This is, of course, as I'm a German, I, of course, have to refer to Germany. Yeah? But you can see they all look different. There are short ones, tall ones. I'm a typical German, as you can see, by the way. Nevertheless, this is why I'm standing on the floor. Yeah? And I think this idea of being diverse, having different ideas, but joining forces somewhere, because although we go different ways, the value is the same. The value is what we are looking for. There are ways of coherence, as was said early on, but the term really we are looking for is compatibility, that we all agree that there is the same value. And I saw some of the slides outside. There are many excellent ideas, but they are sometimes a very mechanistical approach. And is that? Can we identify 2 plus 2 makes 4? Or does it make 5? Are we looking for 5? Synergizing, or synergy was said before. And I think this is what we have to a little bit to catch up, to understand what the process is. I'm playing with words, I'm sorry. And catch up is, has a double meaning, but we refer here that we want to catch up what is actually going on. Bologna process, declaration, political goals. We all know those. But this doesn't help too much. We have to translate them into what we can measure. Measure sounds mechanistical. Here we are with academic recognition. We have to identify how do we understand. Terminology is one aspect of that, and all has to be quality assured. But as you can see, throughout the years, this had to be developed further into tools, into our friends. How can we make this operational? Bachelor, master, doctorate? Well, by using qualification frameworks in the various countries, which are based on learning outcomes. Learning outcomes are described according also what's on the slide outside. For example, Bloom's taxonomy. But doesn't have to be. We can invent, develop. What is important is how. How have we done this? How transparent is it? And then how can we identify the level and perhaps, hopefully, credits as well as outlined in the European qualification framework for higher education. And that helps us. In addition to the quality defined by learning outcomes, we have a quantitative aspect which helps us in comparing to identify same values. And we have an orientation in the standards of guidelines at European level, which means there's a list. What are the standards? What is a bachelor, a master? Which institutions can guarantee the quality, can look into it? So we have reference points. I don't have to go into these. We can even go further. I show you some examples in a minute. Well, what are the challenges here? And I think the key challenge in all what we are talking about is this learner-centered approach, which is really a change of paradigm in our traditional way of thinking. When I started my university degree too long ago, 40 years ago, and I'm still here and alive, as you can see, I had only one intention, to motivate students. And because I was interested, I had so many ideas, and every semester new ideas. And I all piled them up. I never took anything away because it was still important, I thought. And so did my colleagues. With the result, the students were faced with huge amounts of literature, huge amounts of ideas. They said, oh, lovely, it's too much, I can't do anything, I wait for the final test. And they didn't work that much. This is not what we want. We have to find out how can we, from looking at the student, design our programs. And that means, for example, defining learning outcomes, not objectives of what we want to achieve, but what should the learner know and what should he be able to do at the end of this learning process. That is key. That is important. If we define that, we understand each other. Because the students are the same, more or less. They want to learn in certain areas. And for that purpose, we need help from the qualifications framework. Presently, I'm involved, and I've written, also participate in the German qualification framework for higher education. Now we are doing the same, not only for higher education, but for lifelong. The same I've done at European level. I'm doing it for Sweden. I have done it for several Balkan countries. So it's highly interesting. And I noticed this is a common language. There we find a common terminology when we describe what this qualification is about. From the viewpoint of the student, the learner, what he should know and should be able to do at the end. And helping us in that are credits and the definition of workload. On this basis, which has to be quality assured, academic recognition is relatively simple. Relatively, because it always depends on us, on the institutions to accept. There is no imposition of recognition. It should come from us. It should come from the bottom. we should be convinced, we will be convinced using a similar process with the terminology so that we are sure that what is being done somewhere else is very much the same value as ours. So what we have achieved on this way are what we call the ECTS key features. You know all of them. I don't have to repeat them. I just want to remind you, looking at our topic, achievements and challenges. This we have. Don't invent again. You can try to see how does it relate to vocational training. You have seen the ACVET initiative. How? Please, please, do not make it totally apart. Try to converge. Make it as compatible as possible so that we also can go beyond higher education in the sense of lifelong learning. And here there is one important element I like to stress, the definition of learning outcomes. We know that the credits, the workload, reflects the learning outcomes. And in which way? In the way that there is an average learner who needs to invest time and energy to achieve the learning outcomes. And it does not exclude that individual learners need more or less. It is just an idea of what, normally speaking, such a person needs. But the question, of course, remains, and is key to us, and Tim will talk about that later on as well. How do we know what the learner should know and be able to do? That is the key question. But that is our heart. We are teachers, we are professors, we are researchers. This is what we want to do as well. Here's the definition again. This is all what you know. And just an example, how, for example, in Germany that has been translated. Knowledge has been translated in broadening the knowledge, deepening the knowledge. And the ability to do, we have translated into methods and instruments the student has to know and adapt and use. He has to be able to communicate, not only in foreign languages, also in our own, and also between, let's say, engineers and these stupid business professors, whom I am, or systemic differences between reality theory, applying. Many of these elements. So translating the basic ideas into the national environment and thus making compatible with each other, I think this is our job we have to do. And at the key of it is the learning outcome with the link to assessment, which characterizes the profile of the various programs. We respect the shareholders, including our, not only our students, but also our students. And the credits, they say, yes, you have achieved it. That's the evidence of it. There's a whole row. So we don't have to invent totally new things. We have to translate what has been developed into our environment, thus make it compatible. So we can see the linking pillars in the European higher education area are these compatible structures based on the qualifications frameworks. And you see the plural. There is not only one. There's one at European level for higher education. There's one for lifelong learning. And within the countries, you find a variety. In Germany, we have two. And in other countries, there is one only for higher education, one only for vocational education. We want to have that in one. And that has to be validated. And you see the basic elements. But on the top of this is always trust. Do we trust each other? Or do we need a formula to say, well, if one is there, we add one, that makes two, and then it is fine. That is a real question behind it. So I believe that having been involved with this, credits do not achieve the compatible on their own. But credits and learning outcomes, they do. In fact, they got married. Look at this. Yeah? All we have is the aspects. By the way, these are learning outcomes we identified throughout research work within the tuning project, but also at national level in Germany. We asked companies, in this case, 1,200 companies, half of them medium-sized, half of them large, and more or less we achieved the same results as across Europe. What is it the companies are looking for when somebody has graduated? Independent of discipline, independent whether it's bachelor or master. This is what they are looking for. And I think this is important that we then understand, okay, this is an issue, but of course on top of that, we have our own agenda. So the challenge really is that how can we use the learning outcomes in a way that there is no question about it, that they are clearly stated. They are not unambiguously. They are not ambiguous, but they are unambiguously. So on this way, we can achieve. And look at this. Maybe you remember one of the last communiques of the Bologna follow-up groups. They said, now we have national ones, go out and develop sectoral ones. And we have done that. Look at this, what we have already. At European level, we have the one for lifelong learning, we have one for higher education. Now, many politicians would not like this. And it is, to a certain extent, incorrect, because you can say both are next to each other. But I think lifelong learning comprises much more. Therefore, forgive me for saying higher education is part of the whole education and training. School education, vocational education, higher education, all form our education and training. The same, for example, in Germany, at national level, in your country. We have both, but it's not a necessity. You can have one comprising everything. The same has been developed at sectoral level. You might have heard of the benchmark statement in Great Britain. For many, many faculties, many, many areas. In Germany, we have done the same for chemistry, for social work, for business studies, and some more. That means we have set together, either within the country or even across the countries within the network, and said, what is it our students will know and be able to do at the end of a 3 or 4 year business studies program, for example, at bachelor level, at master level, etc. And I must say, I've translated this idea onto my own institution. We have, for all faculties, one framework. That means we have designed what is a bachelor at my University of Applied Sciences across all faculties. This is being defined. Compatible, using the vocabulary from the European one down to the institutional one. And even more that, all the programs have to be defined. They have a profile. You do the same. Why not using this terminology? Being very consistent, so that you do not have to invent always new rules. You do not have to invent new vocabulary all the time. It's already there. Just use it up to the module when you describe the learning outcomes of a module. Of course, the subject as such changes, but what the student should be able to achieve and to know is very, very similar wherever you go, in whichever areas. The knowledge is, and you will forgive me, the lowest part in what we want to achieve. Knowledge is the beginning. Knowledge is the vehicle for learning to understand, for learning to evaluate, for learning to communicate, for learning to analyze. Without knowledge, you can't do it. But knowledge doesn't stop. That knowledge is learned. It goes on. And as you can see here, this means we have a relationship between everything based on the learning outcomes. And this is supported by quantity, the credits. Then they play a role. Then it makes sense. It does not make sense by inventing new ways of how to calculate credits all the time or having different systems. Well, let's test it. I have outlined here the example you know already. The descriptors taken from the European lifelong learning qualification framework based on knowledge, skills, competence. Now, let's test it. The knowledge, how many layers? Easy. Skills, getting it to a mouth. I must admit, I admire the Americans, how they manage. I do not want to say that they have a big mouth, but at least they manage. And they have the competence in the sense of lifelong learning European qualification framework, it means responsibility, autonomy. And the responsibility is theirs for their stomach. It's not, fortunately, ours. Let's use the Dublin descriptors of the European qualification framework. Same example. Knowledge, layers. Applying, getting into your mouth. You know that this may help you to quench your hunger, getting into your mouth. But also making a judgment. Maybe. And this is what you communicate to your friends. Either this or that. And what have you learned? What are the criteria for fast food? Many layers? Or how to get it into your mouth? Or whatever. But on this basis, I think it's relatively easily identifiable that there is a clear compatibility between the two frameworks. And we have guidelines. The guidelines are there. The key features of ECTS and the qualifications framework. So it's there. We don't have to invent again. Use it, think it through, apply it for your purposes. As I said, you never stop to learning. Well, I think this is an important stage now. And I want to remind you of what I said right at the beginning. What is the time? What's the time? Who dares to say what is the time? Is it 10 past 10? It's not 10 past 10. Or is it 10 past 10? Or is it 20 past 4? 22 4. What's the time? Well, look at your watch. Do you have a watch? Do you still have figures on your watch? No. Why not? Because we have a framework in our head. And this is what we are looking for. We need a framework in our head. We don't need all papers and, again, a certain rule or regulation. Oh, I'm a German. Germans need rules. We don't like uncertainty. But, okay, we have it in our head, this framework, what we are looking for. And this is really the challenge in it. That means we have now to design our programs in such a way that at the end the student knows exactly what he has learned and what he can do. That means the whole curriculum. Look at this. We start with a qualification framework. We can start with what we know about the labor market. We can start with what we want and we intend as a mission statement was said early on, as a strategic intent of our university. And on this basis, we design the program in form of the learning outcomes of a specific study program. And that continues then in the translation of modular structure. The modules have learning outcomes. We have to find out that the assessment is in line with the learning outcomes. The credits are in line. The workload respects it. And the learning and teaching material. Based on our start with the profile outcomes. And, of course, don't forget, the learner should then be able, we must make sure that the learner will be able to do that. We say within 3 years you can do it. Well, have we ever thought how? It is part of our job to find out whether it's 3 years, 3.5 years, or 4-year design. All achieve the same level of learning outcomes. This is the change of paradigm. This is the framework we have in our head. And making it transparent, we can assure the quality. And now there's one further very important step. People have often blamed the Commission or this system for being too much labor market oriented. Employability. Hang on. What does it really mean? Employability is one of our responsibilities of our graduates, that they can make their life, not necessarily in a defined job, but they are able to stand on their feet. That means we use as well, there they are, these arrows, I think, are extremely important. We as researchers, we anticipate what the environment will develop to. Early on we heard a lot about solar energy. What does that mean in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time? Because our graduates will not be on the market today when we design it. They will be on the market in 3, 4, 5, or even later. How will it be? That's our job. So we cannot stand still and just take what is existing now. With our research work, we have to design what really the learner should know and be able to do, anticipating developments. And I can do the same, just showing you again what we have already achieved. At this level, we have all the qualification frameworks. At national level, at higher education level, sectoral level, we have them. Use them. At the level of the university, the learning space, we have information packages, course catalogs. Within ECTS, there is a structure how to write them. You have basic orientations. At the student level, we have application formats. We have a common agreed structure of curriculum vitae. We have learning agreements, transcript of records, mobility pass, language pass, diploma supplement. We have so many things which help us. So we don't have to invent. We have to think, how can we learn this and translate this within our terminology so that we can actually use it? And again, these arrows. So what are the challenges ahead? Since then, we have this Lisbon strategy, Europe 2020, recognition, permeability. It doesn't stop with recognizing, it continues to offering more opportunities between vocational education and higher education, between the different forms of higher education, etc. But one principle in our education system in Europe is, of course, the ratification of Lisbon Convention, which has happened. Also Germany took a long time, but we ratified it. And we see the external developments. Australia was mentioned earlier, or the Asian countries, and I was just last week at another conference in which we tried to identify how we cooperate with Asian. We cooperate already, not at institutional level, but at even the country level or beyond. And this means, and my colleague before also had a similar slide was saying, is that too much? It. Have you ever been to England? Well, I heard everybody studied in England when you were young. I don't understand that. Why didn't you study in Germany? Look, the British, they have the problem. Have you been by car in Britain lately? You arrive at such roundabouts, they call that. And I remember when I lived there, they had roundabouts, and I got totally dizzy, till they learned in the late 60s that there's only a certain number of cars a roundabout can hold. Then it's blocked and nothing moves. Since then, they had clever ideas. Just a few years ago, they started to break down the roundabouts into several small ones. Look at that. Can you imagine how it works? This is reality. Look, how do you know when you are here? You want to get there. How do you do? You go out here, or how do you get? I don't know yet. But there is a framework, and the people know it. Look, this is how it looked from above. Right? This is what we have to on our mind. It all looks confusing. Bologna or Copenhagen, credits, qualification for all it. But look, here we are. It's a pathway. We have them there. And what we need are these pathways, how to go through. And we have frameworks. We need to understand the frameworks. And then and that is one of those learner-centered, comprising not only formal, but that's a stage forward already, also non-formal, on informal learning. I think this is also in your countries a very burning issue later on. Well, learner-centered, I stress it again, and gone are the days when I told the students what they had to do. That is not learner-centered anymore. And on this way, what do we achieve? Well, the student has many more options than ever before. When I finished my studies, that was it, or I continued in the same area. I was a business studies graduate, so I would go on with a doctorate in business studies. But today, that's only one option. You could go into a master of a totally different area. A bachelor in engineering moves on to a master in business studies. Or does a similar bachelor studies, but in another area. Or leaves the university for the time period, goes into the labor market, but I'm sure he will come back or she will come back when realizing that there is a development in the employment sector and he needs to update. Not necessarily full-time, could be evening classes, could be weekend classes. Question, are we prepared for that? Or, here's some of these questions we can leave. Or look at the Bologna achievements. Let's take Germany, and with a degree at higher education, you can move across. We don't even need a qualification framework at higher education. We needed it at the beginning to design our national frameworks, but now it's horizontal movement, no problem. No problem. In lifelong learning, we still need the qualification framework consisting of 8 levels, and we need the national ones. For example, in Germany, a qualification is on the basis of learning outcomes tested to be at level 5. That might be in another country, another level. But this level is not higher or lower. It has the same value. And in the other country, that means this person can do the same jobs, has the same rights as the others did in the country which achieved the same level. Different qualifications at the same level give the same value, and that is what we are looking for. That means, in other words, from the outside, many different things. Many different things. But they are all very much the same. The platform is all the same. Well, we use this model, which I pinched from Volkswagen. Volkswagen, as I am a German, I have to say Volkswagen, yeah? Or Mercedes. They have so many different cars, but most of them, same platform. Same platform. Now, what can we do in university? We use platforms across faculties. We have modules which you can use in any of these faculties. Why not? What we do on top makes them different, adequate to the various faculties. Or, well, I'm not a good drawer, nevertheless, I pinch another example from Lufthansa, Star Alliance. Well, what have they done? They have created learning centers. Well, not learning centers, hubs, where all on the spokes from smaller airports like Osnabrück is here, you go to a hub before you can go abroad, collecting from the region. And that's our philosophy in our area. We collect from different schools across the border within our region and have created a center of learning excellence. Come to us. We help you in developing further, and also through our links you can go across the world or within the European Union, wherever we help you. Or another way of doing it, go abroad for a period of time, but then do not start with identifying individual subject, whether they are the same as at home. I can't imagine a more boring thing that I go out to another countries and have to do there what I miss at home. Well, whether I miss that is another question. But this is not the intention. The intention is how do I enrich? And on the basis of learning outcomes, the means I use may be totally different. This can also be done with one module. We call it MOCA module, in which one module is not being taught. You design with your partner abroad the learning outcomes for that module. The student has to reflect. What's different in these countries? Why do they this? Why do they that? Why do they not achieve this? Many things. And you test the student with your agreement. I could go on with many areas. So when we talk about learning outcomes, we should think, is this just additional? Is it substitutional? Shouldn't we look for complementarity when working together? Or even shouldn't we achieve synergy effects? That is what we want. We want this diversity. We want to get new insights, etc. All right. So the last straw in all this context are grades, but I don't go this morning into it. We have a new proposal within the ECTS user guide, how we get on This is really work in progress. We have had many difficulties in achieving something, but I hope we have achieved it. If you have time, look into the new user's guide. Now, is that too heavy? I mean, too difficult? In German, I would say schwer, my weight. Is that really too schwer? No, it's not difficult. Is it? We can do it. But, we can do it better. Huh? Do we have evidence? Yes, I think so. Because we know that we keep on learning. We don't stop. And that means we are aware in higher education it takes time. Look at me. Now I'm old. I was probably old when I started. But never give up. And that is the important thing. Let's go on. Let's be patient. Let's be tolerant. And wait till we have found it. And now, please, please excuse me for the last slide. But it's one I love, I admit. And that's this one. And I want to say, there are so many people who talk about it. There's so much makeup made up. There is so much lip service. But this doesn't help us at all. Let's work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Volker, for your lively and serious, though entertaining presentation. The floor is now open for questions. Do you want to keep the mic? Please, when you have a question to Volker, be so kind as wait until you get the microphone, because our colleagues in the interpreters booth need to hear you through the microphone. And please also be so kind as to identify yourselves so that Volker knows where you come from. I have one question from our colleague from Yarmouk University.
No.
Okay.
Okay, I'm Hanan Malkawi from Yarmouk University, Jordan. You know, all what you talk about is great. In Jordan, like maybe other Arab countries, we have a problem when it comes to the decision maker level. For example, I will give you just briefly an example of what we happened at Yarmouk University. We had started a joint PhD program with Göttingen University in Germany. We started translating the regulations. We were faced with a problem with the regulations in both universities. So we translated both, and we said we will see what complement here, and we make like compromise. Then we had also the curricula, you know, ACTS versus credit system, etc. And the Dean's Council approved it, the Board of Trustees approved it. Then when it comes to the higher education level, we face problem. We said, no, you cannot do that. The regulations here does not allow you. I mean, you're working for 1 year, and then all of a sudden you are faced with the highest level. Then I think they should be involved. Maybe as a suggestion, all of these seminars or talks, maybe because they will be influenced when they see this. I don't want to take all the time, but the other thing that I really like is that we should not reinvent the wheels. We should start up where the previous one ended. And this is a problem in our countries. When a new minister comes, he will scratch everything, and he will say, I will have a new strategy. So as educators or as scientists or as, you know, people in Tempest, Bologna, whatever, what should we do then if we are talking about equivalence and all of this terminology? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I totally understand you, of course. But when you say it's always the top level which decides, this is why I say go through the national qualification framework. Be involved in designing them. My experience is that is then statutory. It is there, and it is not changed that often, if they have once agreed, like in countries. Whether they accept it is another element, and we have to work on that. But you see, with all the frustration you achieve over the years, I can tell you never give up. Probably this is the reason why I never grew, because there's so much you have difficulties with. Don't give up. It's all the same. But basically, it depends on us. It depends on us. And when we agree, I give you an example. When there was a time when universities of applied science didn't have the same level. It was considered not having the same level as traditional universities. We were founded in the 1970s, some a little bit before, as technical university, etc. And, okay, we couldn't change the government. But what we did, we started to cooperate with partners abroad, with the universities. And our students graduated at these universities. We said to the ministry, do you like that? Do you like that they go abroad to these countries where their achievements are recognized, at home they are not? We achieved it. They don't like the brain drain. They don't like that. So try to find ways in which you can convince, not by argument, but by doing, that perhaps the policy is not the right thing. I'm so sorry, I know the difficulties you're in. It's easy for me to say that, but nevertheless, I'm involved in the decisions, also now in the German qualification framework, where a basic mistake was made. The qualification have not yet all been translated into learning outcomes, and the decisions right now are taken at political level. And which means at a certain time they are blocked because there's a party which disagrees. And we have exactly that situation now with the baccalaureate, with the Abitur. One party says this is level 5, the other party says level 4, and as long there is no agreement on the learning outcomes, there's no agreement. So this is my only hope. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Then the gentleman over there.
Thank you. I'm Rami Ayoubi. I am the NTO Syria. Actually, it's a very interesting presentation, and let me say something very... I was very excited when I looked at the presentation. Just to say that I am, if you are my teacher, I say that I'm against the student-centered learning process. So, but I'll ask you maybe a question that usually we face from our students, especially nowadays in the current political instability in the region and maybe around the world. So the key question in the presentation, how to know that I know, right? Let me ask this question: why to know that? Why this? You see, epistemological question. Why to know that? Why to know how to know that I? This is, I think, is very. Maybe we need to answer this question before we ask ourselves how to know that I know. Thank you.
I'm not totally sure whether I understand.
Why to know? My question is why to know. This is my question.
Why should we do this?
Yes.
We are educators.
Things happening now in the world.
Yeah.
If you look at what's happening, instability, winter, spring, 4 seasons. Yeah. Okay, why to know?
Yeah.
Thank you.
But we are educators, and we have one of the most precious jobs. We educate people, and we want them developing. It sounds funny, but this is the same when I talk about it's okay. If you see that people can make their own decisions, if people stand up and raise questions or talk, I think that this is great. I say the same about the European Union, and many people will not understand me. I was born at the time when there was still war. And I say, since this time, we haven't had any war in Europe, in Germany and the surroundings. If you look at the past, such a period has never been before. So whatever we are talking about, the difficulties we have right now in the European Union, or we have had, they are small in comparison to what has been achieved in the sense of peace. And that is what I hope for your countries as well. Yeah? Sorry, it sounds pathetic, but it's my conviction.
Okay, the gentleman over there, and then you will pass on the microphone among this group.
Alors merci, merci pour la présentation. Alors je m'appelle Bakour Moukhtar, je suis du Maroc. Alors vous avez parlé de learning outcome, c'est-à-dire les résultats de l'apprentissage. Alors c'est une bonne chose, c'est-à-dire en essayant de voir un étudiant qu'est-ce qu'il sait faire et ce qu'il est capable de faire. Mais le problème de faire par rapport à quoi et connaître faire par rapport à quoi? Parce que là, vous avez évoqué la question de module. Et le module renvoie au contenu. Ça a été initié par notre collègue, c'est-à-dire le syllabus. Parce que si on ne se met pas d'accord sur le contenu de cette formation. Alors je vous donne un exemple. Bon, je suis de la faculté de droit, je suis enseignant de droit. Alors un étudiant, est-ce qu'on lui exige de connaître l'organisation judiciaire marocaine, c'est-à-dire qu'il sait les différentes juridictions du Maroc, ou bien on passe à un deuxième stade, ça veut dire est-ce qu'il est capable de rédiger un arrêt, de comprendre un arrêt jurisprudentiel et de le commenter, ou bien à un troisième, un niveau plus élevé, c'est-à-dire on se substitue à un juge et de rédiger un arrêt de jurisprudence. Alors si on ne se met pas d'accord sur ces niveaux, bon, on a mis en place depuis, je crois, le début des années 2000, 2002 ou 2004, les descripteurs du Dublin. Mais malheureusement, on ne les applique pas. Et là, on va trouver un graduate, c'est-à-dire un diplômé d'une université qui sait faire des choses à un niveau déterminé, c'est-à-dire à un niveau de licence. Mais peut-être, ailleurs, c'est le contenu, ce qu'il sait faire, normalement, il est comptabilisé comme diplôme de master. Et ça, on peut le trouver dans la même université, enfin, dans les mêmes universités du même pays. Alors là, il me semble que tester ou de parler de learning outcomes, c'est-à-dire les résultats d'apprentissage, il faut d'abord parler de contenu, c'est-à-dire qu'est-ce qu'on exige à un certain niveau pour un étudiant. Merci.
Well, you always have to think, how do you achieve the learning outcomes? And there you need materials, and you have to think about, there is a content. Of course there has to be a content, there has to be knowledge. But what I want to stress is that is the beginning. What we ask the students to know and to be able to do today is much more than they used to. And that is the problem of it. Yeah?
Okay, I would like to just a remark. Is that approach, how you tie it to the pre-university phase? Yeah. The pre-university, is that influences this, taking care of, or yeah. how you take care of this?
It goes throughout the whole education and training system. It's the same with the baccalaureate, which is the pre level before entering higher education. And there we have also the reform in learner-centered approach. And it goes into vocational education. You find it across. But we are at the beginning. It's not finalized. It's not finalized. Well, what I like to stress here is, as I said, I've been in education since the 70s. And since I entered universities, we have always spoken about reforms. We have always waited for the reform to come. It never happened. This time, with the Bologna process, many people in Germany, being conservative, uncertainty avoidance, had thought, let's wait. It will disappear. And it doesn't disappear. There is really a reform going on, and we have to find out what does it mean for us. We cannot just continue. So thinking in terms of contents, that is the traditional form, but that is not the decisive form anymore. It's a mean. It's a mean to achieve learning outcomes. That means you have to understand there are several pathways to achieve more or less the same learning outcomes, same values, although the subject might be different. I mentioned business studies. Do you know how many elements of business studies are also taught in biology, also taught in medicine? I can give you ABC analysis, I can talk about the life cycle, many examples, they are the same, just different words, but the phenomenon behind the model is the same. Don't think you are unique in your discipline. All right.
Okay. I don't know how we are ever going to finish the slot. Could we maybe do the following thing? That maybe 2 or 3 people, we try to, to collect questions. So we'll work this way, from you, and you just pass on the microphone, and then we move until over there, and then you'll also have the possibility during the panel discussion in the afternoon to again raise questions.
Mohammed Salhin, I'm currently directing a joint master program with Stuttgart University. I'm from Ain Shams University in Cairo. I like the concept of trying to abstract some of the concepts that we're dealing with, some of the approaches. For example, I'm now interested a lot in joint masters and joint degrees. So although I'm only directing this one, but I'm also involved in another two. My main observation is, although they are with 3 German universities, but each university has its own objective behind that. One of them is behind establishing an MSc for the first time in its history, although in Ain Shams we had lots of MSc programs and projects before, so they kind of seeked our assistance in establishing one. Another one was supported by the industry, and they wanted actually to transfer the knowledge and the technology to the region so that it will open a new job market for their technology over there in Germany. And a third one just was after the cultural exchange between the 2 regions. What I've noticed, although the title dual degrees is a common thing, but the objective is completely different, and it's down to the personal interest of the professor and then the staff and the university, and each one has its own problems, difficulties. To which extent do you think that the word dual degrees is just used for different objectives? So the objectives are not really at the upfront when we are applying, but you have to get to know the people so that you would know what are the real objectives behind. So how far do you think that the dual degree are just a cover for so many objectives, real objectives, authentic, genuine ones, but these are the objectives that we need to discuss and talk about, because that will judge sustainability and applicability, reality of such a phenomena of dual degrees.
I know about these problems, and it all boils down to one thing. Do we want it or not? If we want it, we go across all barriers. If you want to marry a certain girl, you will do it. You will achieve it.
Not necessarily.
If you want to, she might also be asked, not the other way around. Yeah? And vice versa. But it's the will. And if you don't want, and I know many German institutions, we are conservative. This is a reform. This is a change of approach. And we are not used to it. We as professors, come on, we know the situation. What are you telling me? I know in my subject what the student should know. And if you start to question that, maybe you get an insight. And if there is a double degree approach or joint degree, then is it really joint? Is it that both of our institutes want it? Can we define then what the learning outcomes are, what we want to do, although we go different ways? And if this is not there, if you don't trust, marriage will be broken. That's a consequence. Yeah? And let's start, never give up. Find your partner. I don't know how long you have waited for your wife. Yeah? You found so many. Okay, all right.
Okay, just give on, hand on the microphone to the next. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Fouad Amour, I'm from Morocco, the National Campus Coordinator. I would like to say first that Mr. Volker was among, if not the one who was behind the invention of ECTS. I would like to say that loudly, because that's just a recognition of this approach. The second thing, I would like to come back to the question raised by my friend Bakor formally, that in fact, when we talk about learning outcomes, this is more or less an ambiguous expression, because the content, when we try to go further to see what this expression really consists of, we find that at least there are 3 main dimensions. There is the learning of facts, of information about many things, and we are professors, we are teachers, we know that. We should transmit at least some information. But This is not the target of the learning, of course. There is the second dimension has to do with the analytical dimension of learning. We want to prepare students to analyze, to make links, relationships between many things. But the critical dimension is the third one. How to go further, to analyze critically things and to propose. And this is a really big challenge. Not for students, but as well as for us, for teachers. But I would like to shift to another point. You know, I used to monitor some projects. And as you may know, that many projects in which many universities are involved, and especially Moroccan universities as well as European universities. And we sometimes, and very often, we are in face of lots of difficulties to compare some studies, to compare some the quantity as well as the quality level. How to create, how to have a clear perception about this diversity of approaches, diversities of higher education systems, but to compare them. For instance, to compare Algerian or Tunisian land work with Moroccan one. In this sense, this is my proposal, and I will finish by that. If it's possible to create just a guide facilitating this comparability between systems. You know, there are ECTS, and we know that ECTS, there are quantitative level, how many hours, and the efforts of people to evaluate, to assess, but also how to compare the content as well as the quantitative workload from one university to another. If it's possible to set up tables to say, for instance, that in this matter there are many hours, the work that students has to prepare, for instance, in terms of preparing dossier or anything like that, but to have this, and this will facilitate enormously, mainly and critically the comparison between our higher education systems, because we are in need of that in order to go further, and this will facilitate many things in the future. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I think you underestimate the value of describing the learning outcomes at the different levels. You underestimate that. And if you found your terminology, start it in your university, start it between the institutions, to describe what is a bachelor in our institution. Well, we have the European qualification framework saying what a bachelor is. But if you ask the universities across, they often do not know it. They don't know what a qualification framework is. Now, in some countries, accreditation is exactly there to prove whether the learning outcomes documented in one bachelor program in Germany is equivalent to the qualification framework of Germany, for example. And please don't underestimate, there are quite a few useful publications on how to write learning outcomes. That is really the issue. How to write it in a terminology we understand, and not to invent totally new words. As I said before, and I saw on the slide, why not using Bloom? We don't have to be, we are not pedagogists, scientists. Let's use a framework which seems to work and which can be translated into many languages and understood. If you have a better solution, no problem. But at least we should have this kind of common terminology. And we can send you the list. If you don't have it, we are using it quite a lot. I use it in my own institution. Because academics do not like to have such lists. If they have it, they say it doesn't exist. And that is always a play. Yeah?
No. If there is just a kind of table, saying that, for instance, for Morocco follows, as you know, modular system. Yep. How to shift from modular system to ECTS without really adopting ECTS. Without adopting it, I mean officially, for many reasons, you know them. But to have a comparative table at any time that we analyze a higher education system, we can have a sort of étalon de mesure. This is a big challenge, but it is possible, I do believe. Thank you.
Okay, can you pass on the microphone? Yeah, so by the way, before you all get excited, we're going to change the program a little bit. There are so many demands for interventions that I would like to ask the two speakers that will talk about the Euromed higher education equivalence experience. We will have lunch earlier, and then the two of you maybe can do it after lunch. You will have your time slot, basically. But now I would like to give another 20 minutes to the discussion of this, so I can get all the interventions. I'm sorry, with the microphone we can just go on one by one. So you just have to be brief.
Yeah,
if possible.
I'll try to be very brief. I'm Yasser Shaib. I'm the National Tempest Coordinator in Egypt. I've heard about the word tuning this morning, and I've heard about it from in your excellent presentation. And I'm wondering, could it be the solution? Is tuning, tuning is something that exists in Europe since 2002, and then it went to Latin America, and now there are some trials to make it in Africa. Why not go for a tuning mechanism for this Mediterranean country? Could it be a solution?
Well, this is what we are talking about. We are tuning, but tuning as such is an organization. I am on the steering board, but I would not necessarily recommend it. I always think, let's do it from us. We have all the instruments. If tuning methodology is published, etc., you can look at that. But I also always want, don't ask for something which is imposed on you. Develop it on your own. It must be your property. It must be your ownership. Yes. Yeah, why not? If you voluntarily agree to it, why not? Yeah? That's up to you. Or we sit together in workshops like this, and we develop, in tuning, for example, we did it sector by sector. I chaired the business group, for example. And we looked at ECTS. You can do similar things. Setting up, as we saw in the first session, there were also some different approaches, but similar. Why not?
Volker, das Mikrofon bitte zum Mund.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Why not setting up similar developments on your own? But it must be you. Yeah?
Yeah? Okay, we'll now change to this side, and then we'll be coming back.
Finally, thank you. It's good that you consider this side. Thank you.
Leftist.
Yes. I would like to thank you for your Ahmed Al-Jayusi NTO Tempest Palestine. I'd like to thank you for your wonderful presentation. That is really, I like it. I also like the hamburger, but I want to just make a short comment that the learning outcomes that we focus on, I'm talking about my area, Palestine, and maybe this is the situation, could be in other neighboring countries in Mediterranean, Middle East, is the real issues that we focus on access more than quality, we focus on quantity more than, we focus on still progressing from authoritarian frontal teaching, choke and talk situation into more cooperative learner-centered approach. We are still trying to focus on moving to more collaborative techniques of teaching in the progressing stage, quantity versus quality, but focusing on the learning outcomes mainly this is a real challenge because we also still focusing on rote learning, knowledge-based, more than skill-oriented. And this is the real challenge that I'm saying maybe we need to cooperate or more as Euromed partnership to focus more on how to progress building skills, not forgetting knowledge, of course, but more instilling skills than knowledge. And I do agree with your statement, but we have to start it, that education necessitates long time, maybe a lifetime, but that we should not be frustrated by that. We should work on it and start it, even it's a long process. And I think the Middle East is in progressive stage, trying to shift from quantity to quality, from learner-centered approach, from authoritative approaches into but the political situation in general is mainly also progressing from autocratic to democratic, which is reflecting the reality in education. And education is not an autonomous by itself, it's affected by other situation. The political situation is part of it. That's why it's a real challenge. Thank you.
But we don't give up.
Yes, I would just like to reiterate what my colleague Nidal has just said. My name is Michael Sansour. I'm from Bethlehem University, Palestine. It's about learning outcomes and the measurement of learning outcomes. At this stage, at least in Palestine, we cannot have a comprehensive measurement of learning outcome. We can only measure knowledge and layers of knowledge, but we cannot really analysis, communication, problem solving, critical thinking, because our students are not being taught in a way that would develop these faculties. And the reason is twofold. One is that we are getting students from the schools who have not been educated in this tradition. The second is that the teachers do not know how to teach them in this way. And it's a vicious cycle, really, because the teachers that are qualified to become teachers in our faculties of education are being recruited from among the least competent students to become teachers, because not very few people want to become teachers in the first place. So we have a lot to work on in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. And don't forget one statement. At least in Germany, how did you become a professor? Did you become a professor because you were good at teaching? Not at all. You were a good researcher, you made a research career, and it was expected that you could teach. No further comment. Yeah?
Okay, my name is Dawood Zaatari from Palestine, Technical University. Just to elaborate on what my colleagues from Palestine mentioned, actually, we don't have unique criteria for assessment of intended learning outcomes. And since qualifications depends basically on learning outcomes and the quality enhancement and control, as what we heard in this morning and as what we all know. So since we don't have uniqueness measures for outcomes, I would have loved to see in this seminar something to address this issue, but unfortunately when I reviewed the agenda, I did not, I expected everybody to talk general as what I have seen in your presentation, which is an excellent presentation, and then with my colleague's presentation this morning. So what I suggest, in either to give some focus in the next coming sessions on this issue, because if we don't have unique definition for learning outcomes, which depends on the qualifications after that, and then to get the degree, and then after that we talk about equivalence. So if we just have to pick it from the beginning of the chain rather than just to wait until the end. My last point is, for you in Germany, you have a qualification framework. How is it comparable to other EU countries?
Test it, look at it, pinch it, steal it. We have developed in so many countries. Now in Sweden, we look at the German one, we look at the Austrian one, we look at the British one. We look at them and see, is that us? Does that reflect our country's education system? If it does, fine. Some countries have just taken the European qualification framework and said, this is ours. Now it's okay. Huh? The Maltese, the Finns, etc. But look at it. First of all, understand the concept. And Tim, by the way, will outline more details about what I have said. Although at a certain stage we talked about it with each other.
Okay, just my last point for Palestine and all Arab region countries. I would love to see some common work towards this issue so we can really talk in one mouth. Thank you.
Okay, Chris, can we move over there and then to this side again?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief question, actually, based on problem of relating or overcoming the evaluation gap between ECTS and grading system. And I'm just going to talk about a little experience. Oh, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Mohammed bin Haddou from Fahd School of Translation in Tangier, Morocco. We have a little experience with two schools in Belgium. This is students' mobility. And we always find problems at the end of the year when we come to evaluating the work of both students. I mean, Moroccans in Belgium and Belgian students in Morocco. The expectations are different. You know, for example, my school is specialized in translation from different languages into Arabic, or from Arabic into different languages. And when the Belgian people come to Morocco, they expect, this is something that it is still an enigma, they expect that they are going to get credits more than we give in our grades. And that's because we base our education on both skills and knowledge. While it seems to me, I might be wrong at this point, it seems to me that in Belgium, in these schools, they based more on language per se. See, but for us, for example, when we teach translation, we take text as an ultimate unit of translation, where they take, for example, language, the mechanism of language. That is to say, just the structure. Now, when we come to evaluation, here we have a problem. And then when I heard my friend saying that you initiated this ACTS, my question is, how could we overcome this gap? For example, and I'll give you just the final question, final incident that happened just recently. You know, when a student from Belgium got just 12, and he said to the teacher, "Why should I get 12? I'm expecting 18 or 20, something that we never give in Morocco. I mean, 14 is nearly the highest, or 14 or 15 is the highest grade, and that's a problem. So how could we, for example, overcome this gap?
It's a problem of understanding. Grades have nothing to do with credits. Grades are there to identify how well did the student perform according to our criteria we fixed for achieving. Credit is given for having been successful, but not how the student has been successful. Having been successful. And this is identified beforehand when you design the program on the basis of what we call workload. And that means the participation in seminars, the hours, plus preparation, plus way of thinking, individual work, reflecting. But it's fixed. The student cannot expect, after the semester, more credits than was defined within the program. He may try to get the best mark, independent of credits. Right? Clear separation.
Okay.
Okay, I'll be very brief. My name is Mohamed Ezroura. I'm from Rabat, the University Mohammed V, Morocco. Thank you for an excellent lecture, which really enjoyed very much. Interpolates me on different levels. One of them is the student-centered education. In Morocco, I find it really very problematic because once you try to engage the students more, then the students are really at a loss because they're used to a whole tradition of the lecturer who knows it all lecturing at them. And I think we know that the student-centered kind of education or pedagogy goes along more with the systems where the students pay the fee. In a sense, the market tries to please these students and to give them a voice in the classroom so that they will have an input and then they should not be upset, etc., etc. And in a way, I find it kind of challenging from that particular perspective. The second point is, I'm wondering about what equivalences output would be in terms of crossing the border between the South and the North. That in a way, who would be served more or most by the equivalences or the whole system, that the modular system, the Bologna system that we have been applying, the MLD system, that trying to level the type of knowledge that is being imparted by these institutions. When these guys, these people graduate, they flee to one side of the border, but definitely not to the south. So that is a little bit, I find it personally troubling. The third point, and I'll end you with that, is that the cultural dimension. Very often is that when you cross the border, what language really is becoming the dominant one? Are we moving into the territory of power, domination, colonization? So the cultural dimension is really very, very disturbing. And I'll stop here. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I myself teach cultural management, and culture is not language. Language is an element, but it's not all. There are many more things, and I hope that we get this diversity. You remember at the beginning, I don't want to have identity. And who benefits? We all benefit from this. I had a very nice experience, nothing to do with different genders, in a workshop in which suddenly a handicapped person arrived. He could only make noises. He could not articulate a word. He had a woman, a girl, a young lady next to him who translated these sounds into words. And this young boy had an idea no one had ever thought about. Excellent. That means we may not understand the words immediately, but with the help of all of us and experts, we enrich ourselves. And I think that is the important thing. And also when you said at the beginning, that is a bit worrying whether you misunderstood me. We are not doing it for the labor market. We are not going into class and say, students, what are we going to do today? That's not the point. Student-centered means we have the responsibility for our young ones that they can survive in the future. And therefore we have to listen to what's going on. We have to find out with our research work and formulate it into learning outcomes. That is our job. Not asking the student, but students participate in the various bodies in a democratic way, as it is with professors. They don't dictate. All right?
Okay, then the two gentlemen, the two ladies, and you, sir. And
okay, thank you very much. Arif Al-Soufi, Tempest, Lebanon again. I advise all my colleagues to redirect and relink their questions, their comments to the subject of the seminar, which is equivalence and recognition of diplomas. So my question is, if national qualification frameworks could help in responding to this issue. If the way of measuring quantifying the knowledge by the ECTS or else could also help, if the way of defining the learning outcomes could also help, so why not doing it? I think we can do it. So that's the basis of. Another question is, you mentioned the word trust. I think it impressed me very well. Trust, this word enters into the fabrics of every process. I think there's a trust between decision makers and educators, between labor market and academia, between student and teachers. So do you think the trust comes before agreeing on the procedures and the framework, or after, or within the creation and the building of this process?
This is really difficult. What is always first, the egg or the hen? Oh? Right? No, you cannot say that in general terms. Trust normally is built, is developed. And how is it developed? When people speak together, when people work together. Whether you have to have rules beforehand is, in some societies it might be, in some it is not necessary. I don't think there is no general rule. It depends already when you approach me. Do you approach me in a way, oh, he's a German? Or do you approach me, he's a human being. He is a small boy, or whatever. And there we start. So sorry for having not a better answer to that.
Okay. Hello, I'm Shafiq Mokbel from Lebanon. I'm from the Higher Education Reform Expert. Thank you for the presentation. It was very. I think I have heard a lot of questions regarding mechanics, but I would like to go back to the motivation. I am not afraid that change of paradigm will occur, but it will occur in several. It can occur in several ways in our region. It can occur in a slow and smooth way, by a student getting PhD now in Europe and the US and going back to the education system and reforming it slowly and smoothly. Or it can occur by a hard way. Just massively students go to the internet and see YouTube on courses in the Stanford or MIT or in France in some universities and just asking the professors, this is not up to date what you are telling us, and then this will make also a clash. This will be very tough. But what I'm afraid of is that whenever, in both ways, if we are not responsible enough, in both ways, if we do not adopt an inherent reform process in our region, what we will adopt is something that is, as you said, I say, what we adopt will not respond to the problems of our regions. Because, for example, if we take the qualification frameworks, we should involve also partners from the active sector. And we also need our students to be competitive in international labor markets. So my question, which I think is very at the level of motivation, how can we motivate and make ourselves and our colleagues in the higher education and at the social level conscious of the problem and its impact in the future? And because we should start there, and then the mechanisms comes later on. And as you said, you can just adopt what you have developed in Dutch. Thank you.
Well, I have only one answer. Continue with what you are doing now. You are one of the here experts. Many of you are. Please continue. And then in 20 years' time, we meet again when you are old and talk about what happened years ago. But it will take time. Don't give up. Yeah? And talk to more Bologna experts, mixing. I think that may be missing a little bit. Yeah? I don't know. Sorry.
I want us to take a bird's eye view of the whole education system that you're talking about and look towards the future. We're preparing our students or the next generation for a future that we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So the whole education system has not been evolving as other sectors in life has been at the same rate. So your quote of that change is slow and it'll take more than a lifetime I think that concerns the traditional system. But as what we're seeing around us, that things are changing very, very fast. And actually we're losing students not wanting to enroll in universities because they can acquire all the knowledge they want through the internet. So I think this calls for thinking outside the box, for innovation in education. And I'd love to listen to your thoughts or anybody's thoughts on that. How can we change? Because I think the students or the young generation, let's say, are going to take charge probably of education and reform it in a way that we can't even imagine because they're living in a world that's very different from ours. And their challenge won't be that they're being bombarded by certain different types of training. They're going to develop something totally outside the box. So I'd love to hear anything about that. Thank you.
Well, for me, this is quite clear that it changes, and we may not have the time to because of the pressing environment. This is why when I asked about are we prepared, for example, at the universities for those learners who come to us after some years of experience in companies and they come for weekends, for evenings? Are we prepared for that? Do we know how to cope with this? Or in Germany, we still believe that also next 10 years we will have the same type of students. But look at the demographic figures. They disappear. There are no babies. And who will we be teaching? But in universities, are we used to looking into the future? Are we used to design strategies, to choices? This is a way of training. As you said, teachers have been trained somewhere in the world. We hope the same. And I must say the younger generation, although not the age is not always decisive. Yeah? I have to say that, as you can see. Yeah? But nevertheless, it is true. Let's stay young in our brain and hope that we push it forward. Huh?
Okay, so I'll take two more interventions and then we definitely have to go to lunch because otherwise we're going to disturb the whole setup of our hosts. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ahmad Haija, the Timpas Office of Jordan. I have one question and one comment. The question is related, probably part of the question was already asked, which is related to the National Qualifications Framework. Timpas is a bottom-up approach, which means we work with individuals, faculty members, students, and so on to make the change. Now, as we hear from our colleagues, it is the up part which is sometimes difficult really to make the change because they take decisions. So my question is, what is, in your opinion, and based upon your experience, the best approach of really having the qualifications framework in our countries, first of all, to be aware, to raise awareness about, and then at the end to get that thing done, because ultimately it's very important for a number of issues that are related. That's the question. Now the comment, I don't know, it's not to you, it's general actually, which is focusing on the up part. The Bologna process is, of course, decision by ministers of Europe, and after that, our ministers are also involved through what is called the Bologna Policy Forum and so on. Therefore, my recommendation is that to really use the opportunity of our ministers and high officials when they meet with the counterparts in Europe or in our countries, to educate them as much as possible about the components of the reform that we need to do. Because although they change very quickly, I as a Timpas officer, I have changed 8 ministers, or 8 ministers have been changed while I'm still in my office over 7 years approximately. But still, I think, but I think really using this opportunity is very valuable for us in general, I should say. Thank you very much.
Dear President, Dr. Volker, thank you for your presentation that I believe that it must be in the reference book for every university that would like to apply ECTS system. In fact, I'm saying that because I'm the Director General of Higher Education in Lebanon, and I'm from the side of the ministry, you see. I'm not in the university. I'm a professor at the university, but now I'm representing the ministry. One of the problems that we have in our countries, in Arabian countries, that they didn't understand well the ECTS system. We know it better than them. They think we have the Arabian qualification framework. Maybe it's bad, but we can go on from a reference. They apply, at least in Lebanon, badly the ECTS system. I have 2 universities that I have a very difficulty with them, Lebanese University and USG University, which is a huge university in Lebanon, that apply badly this system because they didn't understand what you have said before, that we must go on from In Europe, you have the European qualification framework, after that the higher education qualification, and we go on down. They thought that, well, we have 60 hours, we divide this by 10, we have 10 credit system. Then I believe that we, as ministers, we understand the difference between a grade and a credit. And in Europe, you know, in France, for example, they have master level, grade of master, they have diploma engineer, engineering diploma, and sometimes we have a problem even with the European universities. The DS that we have decided by Bologna Presses, the diploma supplement, is not applied very well. I receive now from Germany, I'm saying about Germany because I am the responsible of the equivalence committee in the ministry. We receive degrees, master degree, we don't know if it is in Lebanon we have what we call an engineering committee. There is an order for the engineers to define. Then we have a problem for the recognition. We talk about equivalence, and it's completely different for us in Lebanon. When we talk about recognition of diploma engineering, now we have a difficulty because some university doesn't define the difference between, you see, between a grade and a ECTS level. They have 300 credits, but we don't know if it's a Master of Engineering or other. Then I think that there is many things to discuss, but I'm very happy to hear what you have presented, and I really believe that your presentation must be a reference in the reference book to apply the ECTS system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But it reminds me that I didn't answer your question because I was still thinking. And here I can link it very well. There is a problem also in Germany that in the way of applying these elements and having understood. And I can tell you many funny stories. But isn't that a little bit typical for professors? They will never say, I don't understand. They say they are figures, we use them in the way I like to interpret. I make it up. And so we have many different systems and they don't understand each other. So I would always try to get involved. And as I said, I really got involved in my own institution. It took me long, nobody likes me anymore, but that is normal. And also go into the country level with the qualification framework, or with many colleagues in the networks like Tim. We have many others in started tuning now across the world. There is a network of people, and that's the only way. You cannot win it on your own. Find partners. Yeah.
Okay, dear colleagues. Volker, thank you very much for your patience, for your energy. Thanks to you for being prepared to switch the program a little bit. So now we